I remember the night vividly, the air in my small apartment thick with tension, the city lights outside flickering through the cracked window like distant hopes. We sat across from each other, the silence louder than any argument could be. His eyes, once warm and familiar, now carried a coldness I hadn't seen before. He told me, blunt and unforgiving, that I'd never make it, that my dreams were just childish fantasies. I tried to hold back the tears, but each word felt like a weight pressing down, crushing the fragile confidence I had left after years of struggle. Back then, I was barely scraping by, juggling 2 part-time jobs while trying to launch my own, a small business idea. The walls of that apartment felt like they were closing in, every peeling paint chip a reminder of how stuck I was. He had been my biggest supporter once, but now his doubts had poisoned everything. "You're wasting your time," he said, voice heavy with finality. It wasn't just a breakup, it was the shattering of a dream, the loss of someone who had been my anchor in the chaos of uncertainty. I packed my things silently that night, the tears finally spilling over as I tried to convince myself I was better off alone. The streets outside were cold and unforgiving, mirroring the emptiness inside me. I wondered if I was really deluding myself, chasing a future that didn't exist. The city buzzed around me, indifferent to my pain, as if reminding me that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. I vowed silently to prove him wrong, but that promise felt fragile. A whisper lost in the storm of self-doubt. Days turned into weeks, and every morning was a battle to get out of bed. The dreams that once fueled me seemed distant, overshadowed by the harsh realities of rent, bills, and endless rejections. My friends tried to lift my spirits, but their words felt hollow. I avoided the places we used to go, afraid that the memories would drown me. Still, beneath the despair, a small ember of determination flickered. Maybe this was the breaking point, moment I could either crumble or rise from the ashes. Late nights were spent poring over business plans and watching tutorial videos. Desperate to learn anything that might inch me closer to success, I devoured stories of people who had made it against all odds, clutching at them like lifelines. But every failure felt personal, every setback a confirmation of his words echoing in my mind. The city's neon glow became both a beacon and a torment, reminding me of dreams too big for someone like me. Yet, somewhere deep down I refused to let those dreams die. The loneliness was suffocating. I missed the comfort of companionship, the shared hopes and whispered encouragements. But maybe that was the problem. I had been leaning too much on someone who never truly believed in me. Alone, I started to see my own reflection differently, not as someone lost or broken, but as someone with scars that told a story of survival. It wasn't easy to accept, but this solitude was the harsh teacher I needed. The beginning of a new chapter, unwritten and uncertain. One evening, standing on the rooftop of my apartment building, I watched the city lights shimmer like a sea of stars. The cold wind bit at my skin, but it also cleared the fog in my mind. I realized that success wouldn't come overnight or without sacrifice. It would take grit, late nights, and the courage to face failure head-on. The breakup had torn me apart, but it had also stripped away illusions, leaving only raw truth. If I wanted to prove him wrong, I needed to start believing in myself first. I started small, sending out emails, attending networking events, and working late into the night. The road ahead was daunting, and sometimes I questioned if I had the strength to keep going. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of that night, of his harsh words echoing like a challenge. They became fuel rather than chains. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was building something that could withstand storms, including those of the heart. That chapter of my life ended in heartbreak, but it also planted the seeds for everything that would come next. It was a lesson in resilience, a painful reminder that not everyone will believe in your dreams, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth fighting for. The city outside my window kept moving, and so did I, step by step, toward a future I was determined to claim on my own terms. The days after the breakup were a blur of quiet desperation and restless nights. I found myself wandering the crowded streets of the city, feeling small and lost among the sea of strangers. The ache of loneliness settled deep inside, but beneath it, a faint glimmer of hope began to stir. I knew I couldn't let the past define me. Every step I took was uncertain, but I started to look for new ways to rebuild my life, even if I didn't know where to begin. The city's hum became a soundtrack to my silent determination. Job boards became my nightly ritual. I scrolled endlessly, searching for opportunities that matched my skills, but also allowed room to grow. Rejection emails piled up, each one stinging like a reminder of my vulnerabilities. Still, I applied relentlessly, crafting cover letters that poured out my passion and resilience. In between interviews and applications, I read self-help books and watched motivational talks, desperate to reshape my mindset. It was a slow, painful process of healing and learning to trust myself again. The city itself was both a challenge and a teacher. Its relentless pace forced me to move forward even when my heart was heavy. I took on odd jobs, barista shifts, freelance gigs, anything that paid the bills. The work was exhausting, but it kept me grounded. Walking through neighborhoods buzzing with life and stories made me realize I wasn't alone in my struggle. Everyone around me was fighting their own battles, carving out a space in this sprawling urban jungle. This realization gave me quiet strength. Some nights the weight of self-doubt pressed in hard. I questioned if I had made the right choices, if my dreams were just illusions. But those were the moments I reminded myself of the promise I'd made to rise above the hurt and build something real. Slowly, I began to set small goals, finish a course, network with one new person, improve a skill. Each achievement, no matter how minor, felt like a step away from the shadows of my past. One unexpected source of encouragement came from an old acquaintance who reached out after hearing about my situation. Their belief in my potential was a balm for my bruised spirit. We met over coffee, and their stories of overcoming setbacks ignited a spark within me. I realized that vulnerability could connect rather than isolate. This fragile new support system reminded me that growth often comes through the kindness of others, and that I didn't have to do it all alone. Balancing work, learning, and healing was a constant juggling act. I had days when exhaustion threatened to consume me, and moments when hope felt distant. But in the quiet early mornings and late nights, I started to see the pieces of my life slowly coming together. The city skyline, once a backdrop of overwhelming uncertainty, now symbolized possibilities. Each day was a canvas to rewrite my story, and I was beginning to hold the brush firmly again. Through all this, I began to understand resilience as some grand, heroic trait, but as the small, consistent choices to keep going. It was waking up despite fear, reaching out despite shame, and believing in the unseen future. The wounds of the past still tingled, but they no longer controlled me. Instead, they reminded me how far I'd come and how much farther I could go if I kept pushing forward. By the end of those months, I had started to carve out a new rhythm. I wasn't the same person who had broken down in that apartment months ago. I was tougher, more aware, and quietly proud of my progress. The city, there was no longer just a place of hardship, it was a landscape of opportunity. I was beginning to trust that the path ahead, though uncertain, was mine to claim, and I was ready to walk it. In those moments of quiet reflection, I understood that healing wasn't linear. Some days were steps forward, others felt like stumbles. But the act of picking up the pieces, no matter how fragile, was itself a victory. I was learning to be patient with myself and to find strength in imperfection. This chapter of my life was just beginning, and with every challenge, I was becoming more prepared for whatever lay ahead. After months of relentless effort, the first glimmer of success arrived unexpectedly. A small project I had poured my heart into finally caught the attention of a local client. It wasn't a huge deal, but to me, it felt like the universe was giving me a nod. I still remember the nervous excitement as I pitched my ideas, careful not to get my hopes up too high. When they said yes, it was a mix of relief and disbelief. For the first time in a long while, I tasted the sweetness of validation, even if it was just a small sip. The project demanded every ounce of focus I had left. Late nights turned into early mornings as I worked to deliver beyond expectations. I wasn't just doing this for money anymore, it was about proving to myself that I was capable of creating something valuable. The client's praise was encouraging, but what fueled me most was the quiet voice inside that said, "You can do this." It wasn't perfection, but progress, and that was enough to ignite cautious optimism. Despite the win, doubts lingered. What if this was just luck? What if it slipped through my fingers like so many dreams before? Those questions haunted me during sleepless nights, but I pushed them aside and focused on the work. I reminded myself that setbacks were part of the journey, not a sign to give up. The city's relentless pace mirrored my own ways moving forward, even when the path was unclear. Friends noticed a subtle change in me, a spark that hadn't been there before. I started to talk about goals and plans with a newfound confidence. I was still careful not to boast, but the fire inside was burning brighter. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building. Small victory was a foothold on a steep climb, but it showed me the view from higher up was possible. I kept the momentum by seeking out new opportunities. Networking in local events and online communities, every connection felt like a seed planted for the future. I was learning to navigate the delicate balance between humility and ambition, understanding that both could coexist. The city's energy was contagious, pushing me to dream bigger even as I stayed grounded in reality. Yet setbacks didn't disappear. A delayed payment here, a critical feedback there, reminders that success was fragile. But with every challenge I grew more resilient. I learned to adapt, to listen, and to take constructive criticism as fuel rather than defeat. The road was winding and uneven, but each step was teaching me something new about perseverance and grit. In quiet moments, I reflected on how far I'd come. From that broken-hearted person in a tiny apartment to someone slowly carving out a path, it felt surreal. I still had miles to go, but I was no longer afraid of the distance. The cautious optimism was no longer just a fragile hope, it was becoming a steady flame guiding me forward. Looking ahead, I began to set bigger goals. What if I could turn these small wins into something more? What if this was just the beginning? The question sparked excitement and fear in equal measure, but I welcomed them both. Growth meant stepping into the unknown, and for the first time, I was ready to do just that. That first taste of success wasn't the end, it was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where ambition, resilience, and cautious optimism intertwined, shaping the person I was becoming. I knew the journey would be long, but now I had proof that I was capable of walking it, and that made all the difference. The initial excitement of success began to fade as new challenges crept in. Deadlines piled up faster than I could manage, and the weight of expectations pressed heavily on my shoulders. Some clients became demanding, others vanished without warning. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing ambition with the harsh realities of an unpredictable world. I questioned if I was really cut out for this, or if I was fooling myself with fleeting hope. Money became a constant source of stress. Unexpected expenses drained my modest savings, and payments often arrived late or not at all. Budgeting felt like a game with shifting rules, and the fear of failure lurked in every unpaid bill. I found myself skipping meals, working longer hours, and sacrificing sleep just to keep things afloat. The city's harshness seeped into my bones, and I wondered how much longer I could endure this grind. Insecurity gnawed at my confidence like a persistent shadow. Despite outward progress, inside I felt fragile and exposed. I replayed conversations, doubted decisions, and feared judgment from colleagues and friends. The fear of being exposed as a fraud imposter syndrome crept in quietly but relentlessly. Every misstep felt magnified, every criticism etched deeper into my resolve. Workplace dynamics added another layer of complexity. Some colleagues were supportive, but others were competitive or dismissive. I struggled to find my place, sometimes questioning if I deserved to be there at all. The environment that once seemed full of opportunities now sometimes felt cold and isolating. I wrestled with feelings of loneliness amid the bustling offices and busy streets outside. There were moments when giving up seemed easier. The temptation to retreat into the safety of my old, predictable life was strong. I imagined what it would be like to abandon the dream, to escape the pressure and uncertainty. But those fleeting thoughts were always met with a stubborn whisper inside me, not yet. Something deeper than hope held me back from surrender. Support systems wavered, too. Friends became distant as I poured more time into work, and we didn't understand the sacrifices I was making. Family worries added to the burden, their concerns about my future weighing on me like a silent anchor. Yet, amidst the isolation, I began to learn how to rely on myself in ways I hadn't before. Strength was growing, even if I couldn't always see it. Financial uncertainty forced me to make tough choices. I declined social invitations, cut back on small comforts, and reevaluated every expense. The luxury of spontaneity disappeared, replaced by strict planning and constant vigilance. Each decision felt like a test of my commitment and discipline, pushing me to prove that I could endure the hard seasons as well as the hopeful ones despite the struggles. I clung to the vision I'd built a future where my efforts would pay off. The setbacks were brutal teachers, but they also forced me to adapt and innovate. I sought advice, restructured plans, and learned to manage failure as part of growth. The journey wasn't smooth, but every challenge chipped away at the doubt, revealing a tougher, wiser version of myself. By the end of this chapter, I was exhausted but still standing. The doubts hadn't disappeared, but they no longer controlled me. I realized that setbacks were part of the story, not the end of it. Resilience wasn't about never falling. It was about finding the strength to rise again, even when the future felt uncertain and the path ahead was steep. Amid the haze of doubt and exhaustion, an unexpected message appeared in my inbox. Old colleague reaching out after months of silence. We hadn't spoken much before, but something about their words sparked curiosity and cautious hope. They said they believed in my potential and wanted to offer help. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to accept kindness, but eventually agreed to meet. That small decision would change the course of everything. We met at a quiet cafe nestled between bustling streets, the hum of the city around us like a protective cocoon. They listened patiently as I shared my struggles, nodding with understanding, rather than judgment. Their presence was calming yet invigorating, a steady force I hadn't realized I needed. They offered advice not from textbooks, but from real experience lessons, learned through their own battles and triumphs. Their belief in me was both humbling and empowering. They saw beyond the mistakes and setbacks, recognizing a spark I'd forgotten was there. "You're not alone in this," they said firmly. "We all face hurdles, but what matters is how you move forward." For the first time in months, I felt seen not as a failure, but as someone capable of growth. Their encouragement ignited a new fire within me, fueling a determination that had started to flicker. With their guidance, I began to reframe challenges as opportunities for learning instead of threats. They introduced me to strategies for managing stress, building networks, and setting realistic goals. They shared stories of their own failures and how those moments shaped their success. Their honesty made me feel less isolated and more connected to a larger journey, a community of people fighting to rise. They didn't just offer advice, They became a sounding board for ideas and doubts. Whenever I hit a wall, I could turn to them and find clarity. Their questions pushed me to think deeper and act smarter. Their presence reminded me that resilience isn't about going it alone, about surrounding yourself with those who lift you higher. The partnership became a source of strength I hadn't realized was missing. Slowly, I began to see changes not just in my work but in my mindset. I approached challenges with less fear and more curiosity. I learned to celebrate small victories and forgive mistakes. Their faith in me inspired a shift from self-doubt to self-compassion. This wasn't just mentorship, it was a friendship built on mutual respect and shared ambition. Together, we mapped out a path that felt both ambitious and achievable. The city, once overwhelming, started to feel less intimidating. Knowing someone believed in my potential made the streets seem full of possibilities instead of obstacles. I found myself smiling more, eager to face each day. The sense of isolation began to lift, replaced by connection and collaboration. This unexpected ally became a beacon of hope in the darkest moments, reminding me that support could come from the most surprising places. I realized that success wasn't just about individual grit, it was about building relationships and learning from others. This partnership taught me humility and openness, qualities I hadn't valued before. The journey was no longer a lonely uphill battle but a shared adventure. I began to envision not just surviving, but thriving, fueled by newfound confidence and companionship. By the end of this chapter, I was re-energized and ready to tackle the next phase. The mentor's faith had given me a fresh perspective and a clearer sense of direction. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I felt better equipped to handle whatever came my way. With this unexpected ally by my side, the dream of success that felt more real than ever before. Starting my own business felt like stepping into unknown territory, equal parts thrilling and terrifying. Every morning began before dawn with a long list of tasks that seemed never-ending. From managing finances to marketing, customer outreach to product development, I wore every hat imaginable. The days blurred together in a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and countless hours hunched over my laptop. The city outside bustled on, indifferent to my struggles, but inside I was building something I could call my own. Sacrifices became routine. Social outings became rare, replaced by late nights tweaking business plans or negotiating contracts. Weekends, once a time to recharge, were now workdays filled with deliveries, inventory checks, and networking events. I missed birthdays, family dinners, and quiet moments of rest. The loneliness crept in sometimes, but the vision of success kept me moving forward. I knew that building a foundation meant laying bricks with sweat and persistence. Financial uncertainty. We shadowed every decision. I counted every dollar twice, careful not to overspend but willing to invest where it mattered most. There were moments when bills piled up and the bank account ran dangerously low. The pressure was relentless, but I refused to let fear dictate my choices. Instead, I leaned into creativity, finding cost-effective solutions and forging partnerships that stretched my limited resources. Balancing ambition and personal life was a delicate dance. Relationships strained under the weight of my time commitments and constant stress. Friends and family sometimes expressed concern, wondering if I was pushing too hard. I wrestled with guilt, torn between the desire to succeed and the need for connection, but slowly I learned to communicate better, setting boundaries and carving out pockets of time for the people who mattered most. The daily grind tested my endurance. Early mornings turned into late nights, fueled by strong coffee and stubborn determination. I celebrated small wins: a positive client review, a successful pitch, a shipment on time, and used those moments to recharge. The work was exhausting, but it was mine. Each challenge overcome felt like adding a new brick to the foundation of a dream I was determined to see grow. Mistakes were inevitable. I faced failed campaigns, miscommunications, and moments when everything seemed to crumble. But each setback taught me valuable lessons about patience, flexibility, and resilience. I learned to pivot quickly, to listen to feedback, and to keep refining my approach. The foundation I was building wasn't perfect, but it was real and strong enough to support growth. The city itself became part of the journey. Its rhythms influenced my schedule, its people became clients and collaborators, and its challenges mirrored my own. Walking its streets, I felt both the weight of my responsibilities and the promise of opportunity. The urban landscape was a constant reminder that success was possible, but only through relentless effort and adaptation. Over time, I noticed a shift within myself. I was no longer the uncertain dreamer from months ago, but someone growing into the role of a leader. Confidence crept in, fueled by experience and the quiet pride of progress. I started setting clearer goals, planning next steps with a sharper vision. The foundation I laid wasn't just for the business, but for the person I was becoming by the end of this chapter. The small business was no longer a fragile idea but a living entity, shaped by hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. The journey was far from over, but I had built a base strong enough to support bigger ambitions. Balancing personal and professional life remained a challenge, but with every day, I grew more equipped to face it. The foundation was set, the next phase awaited. Just as the business started gaining steady momentum, an unexpected crisis struck, shaking everything I had worked so hard to build. A key client suddenly pulled out, leaving a significant hole in my projected income. The shock was immediate, and brutal months of planning and effort felt like they were unraveling overnight. I stared at the empty inbox, heart pounding, wondering if this was the moment when everything would fall apart. The financial strain hit hard and fast. Bills came due with no way to cover them, and creditors began calling. I found myself scrambling to rearrange payments and cut costs wherever possible. Sleepless nights became routine, anxiety gnawing at me from all sides. The weight of responsibility crushed me. This wasn't just about me anymore, but about the people depending on the business and my own future. On top of money troubles, legal issues emerged unexpectedly. A supplier claimed breach of contract, threatening costly litigation. I was overwhelmed by jargon and demands I barely understood, feeling completely out of my depth. The uncertainty made every decision heavier, and the stress seeped into every corner of my life. I questioned if I had the strength or knowledge to navigate this storm without sinking. The personal toll was just as severe. The long hours and constant pressure strained my relationships, leaving me isolated when I needed support most. Friends stopped calling, and I found it harder to reach out. Self-doubt spiraled into despair. Was I chasing a dream that was doomed to collapse? The emotional stakes felt higher than ever, and the fear of failure threatened to consume me. Despite the darkness, a flicker of resolve remained. I refused to let this crisis define my story. I started seeking advice from mentors and legal experts. Determined to fight for my business, I took a hard look at my finances, renegotiating contracts and finding creative ways to stay afloat. Every small victory felt like a lifeline, pushing back against the tide of despair. The stress was relentless, but it sharpened my focus. I learned to compartmentalize, tackling problems one step at a time instead of being overwhelmed by the whole. Late nights turned into problem-solving sessions, and I began to see cracks in the crisis that I could exploit. The fight wasn't over, but I was no longer paralyzed by fear. Slowly, the tide began to turn. I won a small but crucial legal battle, secured a new client, and restructured debts. The crisis wasn't resolved, but I had proven to myself that I could weather the storm. The experience changed my relationship with failure, teaching me resilience in the face of chaos. I wasn't invincible, but I was stronger than I'd believed. By the end of this chapter, I was battered but unbroken. The test had pushed me to my limits, exposing vulnerabilities but also revealing inner strength. I knew more challenges awaited, but this trial had prepared me better than any success ever could. The journey was far from easy, but now I had proof I could fight for my dream no matter the cost. The first big test became a turning point, a painful but necessary rite of passage. It taught me that setbacks are not the end but part of growth. With renewed determination and hard-earned wisdom, I was ready to face the future. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't face it alone, and I wouldn't back down. The storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy with uncertainty. Yet, in the aftermath of chaos, I found a strange clarity. I realized that the crisis had stripped away illusions and forced me to focus on what truly mattered. With renewed grit, I rolled up my sleeves and dug deeper than ever before. Every setback became a challenge to innovate, to find new paths where old ones had crumbled. The ashes of failure were fertile ground for new growth. I reimagined my business model, adapting to the changing landscape with creativity and agility. I sought feedback relentlessly, turning criticisms into fuel for improvement. Networking events became opportunities not just for sales, but for learning and collaboration. Slowly, the seeds I planted began to sprout. New clients came through referrals, and positive reviews started to trickle in, each one a small victory that built momentum. Recognition arrived quietly but steadily. A local magazine featured my venture in an article about rising entrepreneurs. It was a moment of validation that sent waves of confidence through me. I wasn't invisible anymore. People began to see the value in what I was creating, and that recognition became a powerful motivator. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making a meaningful impact. The city that once felt like an indifferent backdrop now pulsed with energy and possibility. I navigated its streets with purpose, knowing that every connection, every meeting, was a step toward building something lasting. The late nights of hard work were no longer a burden but a testament to my commitment. I celebrated the progress while keeping my eyes on the horizon, hungry for the next challenge. Challenges didn't disappear, but I met them with confidence instead of fear. Problems were puzzles to solve. Setbacks were lessons to learn. I hired a small team, carefully selecting people who shared my vision and passion. Delegating was hard, but necessary. Trusting others to carry the mission forward freed me to focus on growth and strategy. The venture was evolving from a solo struggle into a shared journey. I started to envision the bigger picture, setting ambitious goals and breaking them down into actionable steps. Marketing strategies were refined, partnerships formed, and operations streamlined. Every improvement reflected a lesson learned in the fires of adversity. The foundation I had built was proving strong enough to support expansion, and that gave me hope beyond what I had imagined. The emotional weight of the crisis slowly lifted, replaced by pride and excitement. I reflected on the resilience it took to rise again, recognizing that the journey had changed me profoundly. I was no longer defined by fear or doubt, but by the courage to keep moving forward. That transformation was the true victory, one that no setback could erase. With growing momentum, the venture began to attract attention from industry insiders. Invitations to speak at events and collaborate on projects became more frequent. The dream that once seemed fragile was gaining solidity and influence. I felt a sense of responsibility not just to myself, but to those who believed in me and to the community I was becoming part of. By the end of this chapter, the business was thriving in ways I had only hoped for. I had risen from the ashes of failure, stronger and wiser. The journey was far from over, but the path ahead was clearer and brighter. With grit and creativity as my allies, I was ready to embrace the next stage of growth and impact. It was a chance encounter on a busy city street, the kind of moment that feels surreal and impossible to ignore. I saw him across the crowd, his familiar silhouette suddenly sharp against the blur of strangers. My heart raced, not from old feelings, but from the weight of everything we'd been through. Time had changed us both, yet the memories of his harsh words and the breakup lingered like ghosts between us. For a moment, I froze, unsure whether to walk away or confront the past. He noticed me too, his expression flickering from surprise to something harder, curiosity, maybe even regret. The confident man I had once doubted now seemed smaller somehow, less sure. Our eyes met, and in that silent exchange, the power dynamics shifted. I was no longer the person crushed by his doubt. I was someone who had fought to rise and rebuild. The tension was palpable, a complex mix of triumph and unresolved pain swirling in the space between us. We exchanged cautious greetings, each word measured and deliberate. He asked about my life, his tone guarded but sincere. I answered with honesty but without vulnerability, aware of the invisible walls I had built around myself. There was no place for old wounds here, only the reality of who we were now. The conversation was a dance, both of us testing boundaries, probing for meaning without fully revealing the scars beneath. As we talked, memories surfaced, both painful and instructive. I recalled the nights of doubt and the sharp sting of his disbelief, but I also remembered the strength I had found afterward, the fire that kept me going when he thought I'd fail. In those moments I saw clearly how far I'd come and how little his opinion mattered now. The past was a shadow, but it no longer dictated my path. He admitted almost reluctantly that he had underestimated me. There was a hint of regret, a recognition that he had been wrong, but pride kept his words guarded, as if admitting defeat was still a battle to be fought. I listened without bitterness, understanding that his journey, like mine, was complicated and imperfect. The roles we once played were shifting, but neither of us was ready to fully let go. The city buzzed around us, indifferent to the charged atmosphere between two people who once shared a life. Strangers brushed past, unaware of the history playing out in a brief encounter. The contrast between the past and present felt surreal, how much pain and growth could be compressed into a single meeting. It was a reminder that life moves forward, even when old stories linger in the background. When the conversation ended, there was no dramatic farewell, just a quiet acknowledgement of the distance now between us. As we walked away in opposite directions, I felt a strange mixture of relief and closure. The encounter hadn't erased the past, but it had redefined it. I was no longer the person broken by doubt. I was the one who had built a life worth noticing. In the days that followed, the memory of that meeting stayed with me. It was a catalyst for reflection, a reminder of resilience and transformation. I realized that crossing paths again wasn't about rekindling old feelings, but about recognizing the power of growth and self-worth. The story between us had changed, and so had I. By the end of this chapter, I was certain of one thing: my worth was no longer tied to anyone else's opinion. The encounter with my ex was a chapter closed, a final test of how far I'd come. I was ready to move forward, stronger and more confident than ever, owning my story on my terms. The day I was named CEO felt surreal, like a dream unfolding in slow motion. The announcement came during a company-wide meeting held in a sleek, glass-walled conference room overlooking the city skyline. Faces turned toward me with a mix of respect and expectation. My heart pounded as I accepted the role that symbolized years of hard work, sacrifice, and relentless determination. It was a moment I had once thought impossible, now standing boldly in front of me. News outlets quickly picked up the story, painting a portrait of an underdog-turned leader. Cameras flashed as I gave interviews, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. The local news ran segments highlighting the company's growth under my guidance, focusing on innovation and resilience. Friends and strangers alike reached out with congratulations, many sharing how my journey had inspired them. The spotlight was intense, but I embraced it as proof that dreams could be realized. The media frenzy brought both excitement and pressure. I navigated interviews, photo ops, and panel discussions with a growing sense of confidence. Each public appearance was a chance to showcase not just the company's success but the values that had carried me through tough times: integrity, grit, and vision. I felt a profound responsibility to lead authentically, knowing that my story resonated with many who faced their own struggles behind the scenes. The role demanded every ounce of focus and leadership I could muster. Strategic meetings, team management, and high-stakes decisions filled my days. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but I no longer felt overwhelmed. Instead, I thrived on the challenge. My team looked to me for direction, and I was proud to foster a culture of collaboration and innovation. The company wasn't just growing, it was evolving into a community. The transformation wasn't just professional but deeply personal. Standing on this new stage, I reflected on the journey that brought me here: the heartbreak, the setbacks, the mentors, and the countless hours of work. I had moved from self-doubt to self-assurance, from uncertainty to purpose. The CEO title was more than a position. It was a testament to resilience and the power of believing in oneself. Public recognition opened doors I never imagined. Invitations to speak at conferences, contribute to industry panels, and mentor aspiring entrepreneurs flowed in. I embraced these opportunities, eager to give back and inspire others to chase their dreams despite obstacles. The platform I had earned became a tool not just for business success but for meaningful impact. Leadership, I learned, was about lifting others as much as advancing oneself. Yet, amidst the accolades, I remained grounded. I remembered the nights spent questioning if I'd ever make it, the doubts whispered by my ex, and the solitary struggles that had shaped me. Those memories fueled humility and empathy, reminding me that success was never guaranteed but earned. Through perseverance, I was committed to staying true to those lessons, leading with heart as well as mind. The city skyline that framed my office window had once seemed distant and unattainable. Now it was a daily reminder of how far I had come. The journey was ongoing, and the role of CEO was just one chapter in a larger story. With every challenge and triumph ahead, I was ready to lead boldly, inspired by the belief that anything was possible with dedication and courage. By the end of this chapter, I stood taller not just as a CEO, but as a symbol of hope and determination. The moment wasn't simply about a title, it was about the journey from doubt to triumph, from silence to recognition. I owned my success, knowing it was built on a foundation of resilience, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in myself. He sat in his dimly lit apartment, flicking through channels when the news caught his eye. There she was, confident, poised, standing tall as the CEO of a thriving company. The anchor's words echoed in the room, praising her journey from struggle to success. His heart raced, a mixture of disbelief and something heavier, regret. How had she become this person, this force he once doubted? The shock hit deeper than expected, leaving him momentarily speechless. Memories flooded back the nights he told her she'd never make it. The harsh words that once felt justified in his mind, now they stung like poison. He wrestled with the weight of his past judgments, questioning if he had underestimated her all along. The pride he once held twisted into shame. Could he have been the one holding her back? The thought was bitter but undeniable, forcing him to confront his own failures. His phone buzzed, a message from a mutual friend praising her achievement. He scrolled through congratulatory posts and articles, each one a blow to his bruised ego. The woman he thought he knew had transformed beyond recognition, and he felt left behind. In the silence, he whispered to himself, "How did I miss this? How did I not see?" The disbelief mingled with longing, a painful reminder of what might have been. He replayed their last conversation, searching for signs he'd ignored. Was there hope he had buried beneath cynicism? The anger he'd felt then now seemed misplaced, a shield for his own insecurities. He realized that while he had been quick to judge, she had been quietly building a life that neither of them could have predicted. The contrast between their paths was stark and unsettling. A part of him wanted to reach out, to apologize or reconnect, but pride and fear held him back, creating a wall too high to climb. He wondered if she would even want to hear from him. The thought of confronting the person she had become was daunting. He feared rejection more than anything, yet the urge to bridge the gap lingered beneath the surface. In moments of solitude, he grappled with mixed emotions: admiration, envy, regret. He acknowledged her strength and resilience, qualities he had once dismissed. The realization that she had succeeded without him was both humbling and painful. He questioned what his role would have been if he had chosen to believe instead of doubt. The internal conflict was raw and consuming. Their shared past felt like a distant chapter, written in different ink. He wondered if she thought of him at all, or if he was just a shadow from a closed book. The finality of their separation contrasted sharply with her current prominence. He was a spectator watching someone rewrite her story while he remained stuck in old pages. The gulf between them widened with every thought. The new story faded from the screen, but its impact lingered. He sat back, processing the reality that she had become a success story he could no longer influence. His own path felt uncertain, a maze of what-ifs and missed chances. The encounter with her legacy forced a reckoning, one that demanded honesty and acceptance. However painful doubt, by the end of this chapter, he was left with a mix of emotions: regret for the past, respect for her present, and uncertainty about his future. The woman he once doubted had proven him wrong, and that truth settled like a quiet storm inside him. Whether he could move beyond it remained to be seen, but one thing was clear: her success was undeniable, and it was hers alone. Looking back on the journey, it's clear how far I've come from the depths of heartbreak and doubt to standing tall as a leader. Each challenge, each setback, was a lesson in resilience and self-discovery. I realize now that growth isn't linear. It's a winding road filled with unexpected twists. The pain I endured shaped me into someone stronger, more compassionate, and determined. I no longer fear failure because I know it's just part of the process. The struggles I faced weren't signs of weakness but tests of endurance. Every sleepless night, every rejection, and every moment of doubt forged a resilience that runs deeper than I ever imagined. I learned that self-worth isn't something given, it's built from within through persistence and belief. That belief became my anchor when everything else seemed uncertain, reminding me that I am enough. I reflect on the people who helped along the way, the unexpected allies, mentors, and friends who believed when I couldn't. Their support was a reminder that we're never truly alone on our journeys. Growth often happens in community, through shared stories and encouragement. I am grateful for those connections and committed to paying it forward, lifting others as I climb. The city that once felt intimidating now feels like a canvas filled with endless possibilities. Its energy mirrors the fire inside me, a drive to keep pushing, creating, and evolving. I embrace the unknown future with open arms, knowing that my past has prepared me for whatever lies ahead. The path isn't always clear, but my resolve is unshakable. Success, I've learned, is more than titles or recognition. It's about authenticity, courage, and the willingness to keep moving forward despite fears. It's about owning my chapter, every scarand finding strength in vulnerability. That authenticity is what makes leadership meaningful and impactful. I strive to lead, not just with my mind, but with heart. There are still challenges to face, of course, but I meet them with confidence instead of fear. The lessons of the past remind me to be patient with myself and embrace imperfection. Progress is progress, no matter how small, and every step forward is a victory. This mindset fuels my ambition and grounds me in purpose, helping me stay focused on what truly matters. Looking ahead, I see a future filled with opportunities to grow, inspire, and make a difference. I am committed to continuous learning, to pushing boundaries, and to nurturing the dreams that once seemed impossible. The road will have bumps, but I'm ready to face them with grace and grit. My journey is proof that perseverance can turn pain into power. Ultimately, I am proud of who I've become, a person defined not by past doubts but by the courage to rewrite my story. My worth isn't determined by others but by the strength I've cultivated within. I carry that truth forward, ready to embrace new chapters with hope and determination. The best is yet to come. With gratitude and hope, I close this chapter knowing that resilience is a lifelong companion. Every ending is a new beginning, and my journey continues with an open heart and fearless spirit. I move forward not just as a survivor, but as someone who thrives, stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. After reaching the milestone of becoming CEO, I realized that success wasn't a finish line but a new beginning. The horizon stretched wider than ever, filled with opportunities and uncertainties. I knew the real work was just starting, building not only a company but a legacy. It was time to set new goals that challenged me beyond what I'd previously imagined, and to embrace growth in all areas of life. The weight of leadership brought fresh challenges. Managing a growing team meant learning to trust others and letting go of control. Delegation was difficult at first, but it opened space for creativity and innovation. I discovered that true leadership was less about commanding and more about inspiring. I found joy in mentoring others, sharing the lessons that had been hard-earned along my journey. Innovation became a driving force. I pushed the company to explore new markets and technologies, always with an eye towards sustainability and social impact. It wasn't enough to grow. I wanted to create something meaningful that made a difference in the world. Every project became an opportunity to align business goals with values, blending ambition with purpose in a way that felt authentic. Balancing personal growth with professional demands remained a delicate act. I prioritized wellness and relationships, recognizing that burnout was a risk no success was worth. Meditation, exercise, and quality time with loved ones became essential rituals. These practices grounded me, fueling resilience and creativity. The journey taught me that success meant thriving in all dimensions, not sacrificing one for the other. New partnerships emerged, expanding the company's reach and influence. Collaborations with diverse voices brought fresh perspectives and that strengthened our mission. I embraced these connections as a way to learn and evolve, staying open to ideas that challenged my assumptions. The business was no longer just mine, it was part of a broader ecosystem that thrived on diversity and shared goals. Setbacks still came, as they always would, but I faced them with calm and clarity, knowing they were part of the rhythm of growth. Mistakes were reframed as experiments, necessary steps toward innovation and improvement. This mindset shift created space for creativity to flourish and for the company to adapt quickly in a changing world. Resilience wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. The journey also deepened my understanding of legacy. I began to think beyond immediate success to the impact I wanted to leave behind. How would my story inspire future generations? What values would endure? These questions shaped strategic decisions and personal reflections, pushing me to lead with intention and heart. Building a legacy felt like the ultimate form of success. As I looked back and forward simultaneously, gratitude filled me. The struggles, the victories, the people who believed it was all part of a rich tapestry that made this moment possible. I was humbled by the journey and energized by what lay ahead. The future wasn't a destination but an unfolding story, one I was eager to write with courage and purpose. In this new chapter, I embraced the unknown with open arms. Growth was ongoing, and the possibilities were endless. I stood ready not just as a CEO or a survivor, but as a visionary committed to making a difference. The horizon beckoned, and I stepped forward with confidence, knowing that the best was yet to come.